All right, so we got some official on-record responses from Digital Storm regarding the feedback of our video of the Aventum X, showing how it's basically just choked the F out. Like, it is like UFC levels of choke. Like, it's tapping out, okay? It's not great, but we got some official responses. We got some things to maybe look forward to and some things to test today. So this should be a good one. The XG2736 and the XG2536 gaming monitors from Viewsonic feature 240Hz default refresh rates, 1 millisecond response time mode, and industry-leading 0.5 millisecond moving picture response time modes that are ideal for gamers demanding a competitive edge. Designed with eSports in mind, these XG monitors feature fully adjustable and low-profile footprint stand for optimal viewing distance that professional gamers demand. To learn more about the XG2736 1440p and XG2536 1080p competitive gaming panels from Viewsonic, follow the link in the description below. All right, so we'll talk about what's in the box here in a second, but I want to go through their official responses first. In my opinion, this is how, there's two parts to when companies do something that either the general feedback of the audience / customers versus even just a single opinion like mine are. I think the comments of that video are kind of overwhelmingly in favor of agreeing with us that the airflow obviously is non-existent for like, what, 3 of the 4 radiators that are in there. So this is not just my opinion, it's kind of an overwhelming amount of people agreeing with us. So they kind of watched our video and they responded to each individual point. But the two parts are obviously whether or not they respond to a problem and how they respond to it, and 2, whether or not they follow through on their promises. So this is part 1 of them saying what the changes are that they've already been working on actually prior to our video. And 2, time will tell whether or not they truly follow through on the changes that they're talking about making. So we're in phase 1 of the 2 parts of what it takes for a company to implement changes, right? So the changes are saying, they say, we are working on a new Aventum redesign that will allow for more airflow for the chassis. We've been working on this new design since Q4 of last year and hoping to be ready to come to market soon. So they've been working on a new design for a year, which makes sense. You'd be surprised how much time and effort goes into making a new chassis. Although, unless they wanted to change the layout and stuff, I don't think they needed to redesign the whole thing, just the side panels like we've already talked about. Even a 2-piece side panel, glass on the top, upper half, ventilation on the bottom would be perfectly fine. But it sounds like they're trying to update the chassis as a whole, because like I said, this chassis has been around for years and years, like back when like 4-way SLI was still a thing, like a long time ago. It just sounds like they're trying to redesign the Aventum as a whole, which I'm okay with. Anyway, moving on, it says, your suggestions for a jumper to help with refilling is brilliant. Our Aventum filling setup guide lets customers know how to fill the reservoir as much as possible before turning on the PC, and then having a fill bottle ready for customers to continue to fill the reservoir as the system is running. That I don't agree with at all. I do not agree whatsoever with letting it run, the pump run dry as you're trying to fill it up. It will suck in air, because you will not be able to pump in fluid nearly as fast as the pump is going to move it. That D5 pump moves volume. That's what the D5 is all about. It's going to pull in air, and it's going to pull in the fluid. It's going to cavitate, make all kinds of noise. It's going to aerate the crap out of the system. I don't agree with that. We can have difference of opinions on this, I guess, but I'm a little surprised by them thinking that a jumper was brilliant. Like, that's a little worrisome as far as I'm concerned, because this is like water cooling basics 101 about turning on the power to the pump only and letting you fill and bleed the system before you turn on the system. So that's a little bit of a red flag as far as I'm concerned. Noted on the website, and then also too, they did link to the exact Aventum showing how to use the quick disconnects with the extra tubes they provided, that is intended for being able to be easily drained and all that sort of stuff. The only thing that sucks is like none of the documentation that came with the system or those barcode or those QR code links or anything linked to that video. The QR code on the box links to a completely different system. So Digital Storm, if you're watching, you gotta change the barcode for the Aventum box. It does not link to that video that you sent. And you have to go digging through layers and layers of website stuff to try and find what you found, because I had to basically backtrack from your link to how to get to it from the main site. It's not direct. It might be direct to you because you built the site. As a customer and as somebody that's a half idiot like myself, and Phil, both of us did not find this video until you sent it. Just keep that in mind. If you're gonna put a barcode on the box, it should link to the proper video. Maybe just a piece of paper, because then you only have to update the paper, not the box. Anyway, moving on. Noted on the website saying the Aventum comes with a 560 rad on the top, we'll make sure to change that as soon as possible. Yeah, that's just wrong. That was just wrong information. I haven't checked to see if they've changed that yet. This has been actually a few weeks in the making, so I should probably do that. Anyway, our supporting document with filling the Aventum is the video linked above, because I talked about there needing to be documentation. Fine, video stuff is awesome. Videos make more sense to people than following instructions on a piece of paper. But put the piece of paper with the QR code to the proper video in the box. How hard is that? That's paper. You're buying an $8,000 system here. You can afford a sheet of paper with a QR code on there that says, watch this first. Like, I feel like even pushing back at all on that, saying, well, our video is our documentation. Get them to the video first. I've already explained that. Anyway, we have plans for more documents and videos like these so our customers have the proper support needed. Just get them there. That's all you need to do. The videos are very highly produced and they're great. Just getting there is terrible. It's like a speakeasy. They're awesome, but you gotta go through some hoops to get there. This isn't a speakeasy. Don't make it fun to find. Make it easy to find. Okay, moving on. We'll continue to look and adjust our pricing for parts so we can offer customers the best. Okay, that's just, no one's ever gonna agree on the cost of these systems ever making sense. That's Digital Storm's cross to bear on what the price to performance / profit ratio is. And that's for you as customers to determine whether or not you're willing to be a part of that system. So anyway, moving on. They had some additional documentation here in responses. So those were direct points responded to that I said in the video. Then they gave me a more broad response here saying, regarding the cooling concerns, the Aventum X full glass panels were chosen to balance aesthetics and performance. No, it balances aesthetics. There's no balance to performance there at all. In our real-world testing, we found little to no impact on application usage performance for typical customer builds, single GPU and processor, due to the substantial thermal capacity provided by the radiators throughout the chassis. However, we do offer / we'll talk about this in a second. So let me talk about that first part right there. You balanced entirely biased towards aesthetics, and that's fine. And you wanted to showcase the 3D printing on the glass, the UV printing, that looks amazing. I don't know if you can UV print on acrylic. I think it might be a little too flexible for that. I have no idea, I know nothing about UV printing. Here's my problem with this. The 560 and the 280 radiator on the bottom are doing nothing. Once those become fully heat saturated, which they will, they are just big ass tubes at that point. Here's my problem. The 420 on the top is the only radiator cooling anything in this system once equilibrium happens. The problem with that is now you have created heat move to the bottom of the chassis that is now heat soaking everything around it to an incredible degree that it is now causing an overall rise in temperature inside the chassis that would actually not be present if you only had the 420 on the top. The 420 on the top is the only radiator truly doing anything in this system. And it's having to do with what's left over after the choked off 360 rad or 420, I think it's a 420 rad in the front. Could be wrong, doesn't matter. The front rad is not getting enough airflow either. So the 420 is getting sloppy seconds from what's left over from the heat soak of everything else in the system. And the problem is, yes, equilibrium is gonna happen based on the heat load in the loop. It's just the massive thermal capacity that's in there now is taking longer to reach equilibrium, but it's doing nothing for the overall temperatures. So responding to that saying you saw no real world impact to performance in applications is correct. I said that in my own video. I did say that it's still boosting, you're still getting your full clocks, you know, but the problem is you're getting like 7% efficiency to cost ratio on the cooling loop for making it pretty. And that's where the trade-off is bad. So I take problem with saying you added massive thermal capacity because all you did was add massive amounts of heat soak. And the amount of, so when I run these tests, I have to run the cooler test, which like side panels off first, then put the panels on and let it warm up. Otherwise, you'd be surprised, even with the panels off, how long it takes for all of the metals and all of the fittings and all of the chassis around it that gets hot to actually cool down before I can get an accurate test. So I have to do the cool test first and then the hot test second. It's like an engine in an engine bay in a car. How hot is the metal around the engine, like the fenders and the firewall and all that? Because of the amount of heat that is radiated away from the heat source or the heat load, in this case, the radiators and tubing and all that stuff, it takes a long time once you pop the hood and put a fan on there to cool down everything that the heat is radiated to. So all you've created is a giant heat radiator that is exchanging the hot inside of itself. It's doing nothing. This is basics, and I'm really disappointed that these basics are not being understood or at least adhered to in the design. Like, I feel like if you just removed the bottom rads altogether and only had a free-flowing 360 in the front and a 420 on the top, it'd be overall cooler in the chassis interior temperatures than it is now. Okay, so anyway, we're probably never gonna see eye to eye on that, which is why these panels exist. Because they say, however, we do offer the vented acrylic panels for configurations requiring maximum cooling performance, which should be all of them at this point, especially for multi-GPU setups. Now we're talking about your more enterprise type stuff, because I don't think you're selling any multiple GPU setups that are designed for gaming, and you already offer a vented side panel for that. While these panels boost airflow, they are more prone to scratches compared to glass. That's true. And I don't know if you can get tempered glass side panels made with cuts, like laser cuts in the middle of them. I've never seen that, so maybe there's something with tempered glass that doesn't allow that. I really don't know. Glass experts, comment down below if you can cut a hole inside of tempered glass. I have no idea. When cooling issues arise in testing, we typically recommend switching to the vented panels. So you mean when they notice the terrible temperatures, they should switch to the vented panels? It's not, well, it says when cooling issues arise in testing. So that's just when you test at that point, because they're going to arise, just like the temperatures. It says for your showcase unit, we use glass panels to highlight the visual appeal, which is like the UV printing, like I said. It looks great. I love the more like spaceshipy design they did on it. It looks fantastic, but I need performance first, look second. They're hand in hand as far as I'm concerned. They have to work in tandem. I'm never going to take aesthetics over performance, personally. It says, but we understand the concerns raised about thermals. You are right that when the side panels are off, the system can provide better cooling performance because the radiators can radiate away from the system. Considering the price of the system, yes, absolutely. This is an area of improvement. We're currently developing the next iteration of the Aventum. And then they say they're excited to send me the side panels. So here they are. Those are their official responses. I think some are valid. I think some are not. You guys can decide for yourself. So today we're gonna slap these panels on and we're gonna actually check the quality of the panels too. Acrylic, they're right. Acrylic scratches like nothing else. I still think there's other ways they could have come up with a compromise to meet both the aesthetics they're looking for. Oh, and I wanna point this out too. These are free. If you have an Aventum now and you're like, dude, the temperatures are terrible, they do not actively promote that these are free. So they will send this to you at no cost. I don't know if they're gonna charge shipping. I did not ask that piece of information. I'll put a pinned comment down below once I get a response to that question, and you guys can check the outcome of that there. But acrylic does scratch extremely easily. Oh no, okay. All right. They chose a hexagon print. I was hoping that these would just be open. So now we've got about, I don't know, 60% flow. All right, well, you know, you can lead a horse to water. This one is obviously for the backside, because remember we had those two fans that were like, it looks like they're just mirrored. So that means we have vents now on the front side where we don't have fans. Okay, I guess that's good. Some of that heat can get itself out, I guess. I don't know. Let's get these on and see. Okay, so I think they sent us two incorrect panels. I'll show you why in a second here. First of all, you can see that both of these panels, and I'm sorry I'm wearing flip-flops, it's hot today. You can see both of these panels have the long one, which would be for like the 560 down here, and then this, which is up here, where there are no fans. So I'm like, okay, that can just let some positive pressure out, I guess. There's no positive pressure in the system, by the way. The backside looks nothing like this, and the fans go a different direction the way those are oriented. So I have a feeling, I don't know what to think anymore. There's no fans here, so why is this here? All right, let me get the plastic off, or the paper off, just so we can see in there how things line up. The thing I hate about this kind of acrylic is depending on how long this protective paper has been sitting on it, it starts to tear, as you can see. So the problem is you get these little bits here now that you like start to have to rub and scratch to get out. Now you're gonna scratch it with your fingernail or anything else you're trying to get this off with. This is just,
ain't nobody got time for that.
This is how I wanted to start my morning. All right, I don't have enough time to take all this off, so this is awful, whatever. And I'm sure they're getting all mad at me right now, but this, guess what? This is the experience. So it's choose to fight with this acrylic. And it cut me, by the way. it had a sharp edge, so it cut me. But now the edges are very sharp on the corner. Keep that in mind if you're handling it. There's one other possibility here. They could be yelling at the screen going, Jay, you're a freaking idiot. We did that so that this top rad can pull in fresh air from here. And that's probably realistically why that's there. But when we turn it around, this is the arrangement. Now, the power supply, I just realized, I didn't even notice it from the last test, I didn't think about it. It's getting choked off by the glass too. That's important to keep cool. Look at our cutouts here. So we get those two and the power supply. That's fine. We get one fan and the other one's over here. Like, shouldn't there be a cut there and a cut there? Okay, these are auxiliary fans, to be honest. I'm not too concerned about these guys. The idea here is this is kind of blowing at nothing. I was thinking initially that, hey, that's probably blowing on the backside of the CPU socket to keep it cool. But Phil, if you get in here and look, it's just solid case wall. So I guess it's keeping our fan controller splitter cool. All right, so as I said, I'm starting with the cool panel first because I've got to let it heat soak after. Otherwise, I'm gonna be sitting here for an hour letting it cool down before I can even run my next test. The other thing I didn't do in my previous testing, which I should have, but I'm not going to today, is also run it without the front panel. But this is screwed on as part of the chassis. Like it's screwed in here, I think there and there. So it'd also be nice to see what would happen if the bottom air fan and everything was getting proper airflow. But they only pull in air from right here on both sides and it doesn't go all the way down. There is a fan back here on this section that is getting absolutely no air. Okay, testing time. Okay, so I just ran my tests. I only did GPU temperatures, and the CPU temps aren't as affected nearly as much. The 420 with the free-ish flowing radiator on top, it's kind of enough to keep 170 watt CPU cool. It's gonna spike to 95C, the 9950X does that, so it's a 7950X. So GPU is usually the thing that's gonna put off the most heat. Now here's one of the problems regarding the fans in and not just this system, but any system that is running off, say, like Asus Aura, which is what this one is using to control the fans, not iQ, which is kind of unfortunate because iQ would allow you to set a GPU temp curve, but Aura does not. So as the GPU gets hotter and hotter and hotter, the fans never ramp up unless the CPU is starting to ramp up because of the radiant heat that's causing heat soak to make it sort of rise just because everything else around it's getting hot. So it's a much slower response to temperature changes that way, obviously, than saying monitor the GPU die temp to control your fans. So the fans never ramp up in that instance. So I wanted to sort of talk about that. So let's start looking at the charts. The first chart we're looking at here actually is power supply. Because I thought power supply was actually pretty interesting because of the fact that I realized in this video that the power supply fan is also behind the glass with no vents or anything. So you can see there's actually a fairly noticeable difference in temperature between the two. Now here's the thing. The hottest I saw the PSU get in the 30-minute test, which I need to point out is still not long enough. I guess I need to give it an hour because of the fact that it's still climbing. All of these temps are still climbing after 30 minutes, which just shows how much volume of fluid is inside this loop. But anyway, I digress. It reached over 64C. And you can see that in the trend line on the pink line. That's the pink line is glass on, the blue line is glass off. You can see that one capped off and was still climbing slowly at about 50 degrees. So we saw about a 13-degree delta between glass on and the acrylic ventilated panels. So I'm not sure where that one would have stopped climbing, but it would have eventually. Now, these temperatures are not gonna hurt the PSU in any way. The fan was running, the caps and components of the PSU were definitely designed to run warm. The thing is, heat equals inefficiency. So if you care about efficiency, you probably would have never bought this system to begin with because of the fact that it's not monetarily efficient. But this PSU is not gonna die earlier than anything else because of the fact that it's getting warmer. It's warmer because there's less airflow. Now what you're gonna notice is there's about a 13C sort of trend happening here. So as we take a look at the glass on chart, the light yellow line right here is the edge temp or the normal temp, the GPU reported die temp, and then the darker kind of an amber line is the hotspot temp. So you can see our hotspot went about 84C. The spike right here is about 85C. And this is the 30-minute temperature test running 3D Mark Speedway. It's just a loop that I had going. I like that test more than Port Royal because the test doesn't restart and go into a black screen, so you don't see these dips. It's a more consistent type of run. But this is what I'm saying, like, you can see this trend line is continuing upward. It probably needs like another width of the screen to finally fully equalize. So that's why I need to start doing stuff like this, where we're really seeing, we need to do a test to see how long it takes to reach equilibrium, then run our test. But you can see, we can at least, there's still some data here. I need to tweak our methods. I'm working on it, don't worry. What happens as soon as we put the acrylic panels on? What's crazy about this is you can see our hot spot now matches our cold spot on the glass on. And these temperature differences are about 14°C. So you can see we go from right here where I start the test, it's out here actually in just under 30°C. So there's a significant temperature difference with the glass on versus glass off, even at idle. Even idle with low power draw, low frequencies, there's still, as you can see between the yellow line and the blue line, about that's about a 7 or 8°C difference right there. But if you look at our trend line here, we cap out at just under 60°C, kind of popping above it now and then. I know many of you right now are probably going, dude, air-cooled cards can still maintain 60°C with high fan speeds. You're right, they can. Water cooling right now is definitely one of those things where it's hard to justify these days. And this is coming from the guy that water cools everything. And I'll continue to water cool everything because I'm an enthusiast for it, I love it. But it's becoming harder to justify when you can see that we're still with a massive system like this with the vented acrylic side panels. And this isn't a digital storm thing. This is just the way the dies are designed and the focused heat and how hot they get and how efficient coolers are becoming. We can see right now that we still are, like I said, a couple of times here, we crossed 60. With a longer test, this one probably would have equalized right around here. Probably wouldn't have taken that much longer. But our hotspot never even reached, I guess it did cross 70, a little bit above 70. I think it was about 72 now that I think about it. But if you compare that to our glass on panel, there's a significant difference in temperature. That does not take science to understand. That is, look, I guess the best way to understand an analogy here would be when the human malware was going on. If you were wearing like an N95 mask, I don't mean like the surgical mask, but I mean like the N95 that's like, now imagine that N95 mask that's like, hard to breathe through, is made out of glass. That's what the fans are doing right now. So what does that mean for our frequencies? Well, the yellow line right here is the glass on. You can see there's a bit more of there's a lot of bigger dips in there. And I had to zoom this in, by the way. The range is from 2000 to 2900 because when you zoom out 0 to 3000 for the range of the GPU's operating frequencies, you can't differentiate them. So yes, we have blown up this chart so you can see the differences here. You can see the blue line, which is acrylic panel, is much more solid. Now, a lot of these dips that you're seeing here are not necessarily temperature related at all. Those are actually different scenes happening inside the test. That's why you're seeing them at a pretty consistent interval on both the blue and the yellow line. It's just what you're seeing here, it starts off pretty solid, although about a boost bin down from the acrylic panel. That's because of the starting temperature we talked about. If we go back to here, remember the starting temp is higher with the panel on versus off, and boost tables are related to frequency or temperatures as well as voltage. So because of that difference right there is why we see that slight difference at the start right there. But you can see as it gets warmer, you can see the actual tick downs. Here's the thing. The difference between our more locked chart and our more heartbeat looking chart is about 60 to 75 megahertz. It is operating above the boost clocks that are advertised. But because of GPU Boost 3.0 and whatever we're calling it these days, if there's temperature headroom, which there is because the 84°C is the max temperature, if there is power limit available to it and voltage limit available to it, push the clocks up. So what you're seeing here is it's not able to push the clocks up as high as it can in the ideal situation. The thing is, it doesn't go any higher than this because that's where the VBIOS limits how high it can go. So the differences we're seeing here is about 75 megahertz. 75 megahertz, 2760 is where that blue line starts on the very far left. When you're talking 2,760 megahertz, you'd be very hard pressed to notice a difference between 2,670 megahertz. It's very difficult to notice. Only in these charts can you notice it. So that's where Digital Storm's saying it does not have an adverse effect in the actual performance. They're right, but it's one of those things, like if you're gonna pay an additional $4,000 for this setup with the cooling and all that, additional $4,000 over the cost of the parts, I personally would want it to operate pretty damn, above average, if you ask me. So this is where I don't know if I'm just being ridiculous here. I don't know if maybe I'm nitpicking something, or if I'm starting to feel like I'm crazy here. But I don't think I am. I think for this quality of system, it's an incredible system in terms of like its capabilities and stuff, and the way they designed it. The back distribution panel, the power board thing that was useful for PCI Express cables, not current 12 volt high power cables. Digital Storm did a lot of R&D to design this. It's just, I guess I personally am harping on this again. I don't understand the design choice to go with solid glass when the vented panels do exist for their workstation PCs that use the Aventum X chassis. I'm not a fan of the acrylic, only because of the fact that you're not gonna be able to get all that stuff peeled off without potentially scratching it, because you have to rub on it and stuff. To be fair, they did say scratching happens to the acrylic. It doesn't look as bad, in my opinion, on the smoke stuff as it does clear. The just clear, non-smoked stuff looks way worse than the smoke stuff. But they did respond to me actually and say the acrylic panels are free. No charge for that whatsoever. What they did say though is that unfortunately, the shipping fee, there is one. Which at that point we're like, really? You just spent $8 grand on this? You can't just just throw a guy a bone at $50 worth of shipping? You want $50 more to overcome the design flaw? At least they're not charging for the panels. But the thing is, you're not gonna know about those panels until videos like this exist, because realistically, those panels existing means they know, and they've already admitted, the airflow is less than optimal, and that's putting it nicely. So I'm really interested to see what the next Aventum chassis looks like. They said they will support us in letting us take a look at it and such. Probably will be debuted at like Computex or something, maybe CES next year, who knows. I'm not trying to harp on Digital Storm. I'm really not. Companies like that share the same passion I do for this. It's just it's my job to be critical, where criticism is warranted. And I do feel like this is warranted. So I'm not attacking you guys, talking to Digital Storm directly. I'm just saying, I feel like there's still options available to us here that don't even necessarily require a complete redesign of the panel. I still think a metal frame with a glass panel on the top half and a mesh on the bottom that bolts onto these 4 bolts is something. If you design this, you can design that. And to me, that seems like a better thing to do than to redesign the entire chassis, unless you just want to redesign the chassis because it's time to. That's fine. One last thing I forgot to point out. If you remember here, I showed you how this fan was covered by the solid acrylic panel and that one was open and that one's blowing on nothing. That's actually the one blowing on the back of the socket, the one that's covered. So it's like, it's negligible, the way that would actually help the CPU temps. It's nice that they were trying to do that, but anyway. The last thing I want to point out is in the previous test, when I ran the fans at 100% fan speed, I showed you there was a weird dynamic there where it almost was like glass on 100% fan speed was worse than glass on default fan speed. And I'm starting to think that's because it creates a weird vacuum / amount of turbulence happening, where the fan is just like trying to pull air from anywhere it can, and it's starting to create a strange turbulence dynamic, where the test right now, we're actually a little better than going when the glass was on full, like 100% fan speed. And so the acrylic panel being on there was also at default fan speed, which I already talked about. So yeah, it's just a lesson on what happens when you put a door where you need a screen. It looks beautiful. I think there's a way we can redesign this still that doesn't even need acrylic. Guess what I'm probably gonna do in my new shop?